Okay, this is from the book Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes by me, Pete Rogers. We're going in alphabetical order. We're in the letter F, so we're doing Fisher, Walter Fisher. And we're going to be talking about the narrative paradigm as a foil, a contrast to the rational world paradigm of Aristotle. So here's Aristotle walking with students. Is called peripatetikos, the school of peripatetics. It means to walk around and teach, which Aristotle routinely did at his school called the Lyceum. And Aristotle said, when two men have a conversation, which, means two aristocratic men of Athens, they both have pretty similar values, and they will discuss the topic at hand, and whoever has the better logic, evidence to support their claim, they will win the argument, and the agreement will be made to do things their way. And Aristotle said that's how decisions should be made, and that's how decisions usually are made amongst men of Athens. Okay, but Walter Fisher came along in the 1900s, and he said, hold on a sec. In the real world, lots of times we don't make decisions that way. It's more based on whoever has a good story, and it could be for entirely emotional reasons without a whole lot of logic. Okay, and this became called the story paradigm or the narrative paradigm. Okay. Hey, what's that girl doing at the Lyceum? Sneaking into our classes. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen next? What's that going to lead to? All right, so he says a good story can have compelling emotional reasons. I would say compelling is a key word. Often there is a slogan in there or a hidden meaning, and it sort of pressures the person to do what you want. Like, for example, the story might mean, like I said, every guy's had this experience with his wife, okay, where he might be 100% right, but she's got a lot of power in the marriage relationship. She's the one who decides when it's time to make the two-back beast. She's the one who comes out way ahead if it goes to divorce. So she can pressure the guy. And a lot of times wives are really good at blame shifting. Okay, so basically, if you don't do what I want, you're an asshole. You don't love me. You're just using me for sex. Why are we together? Okay, so, or in other situations, in public situations, in internet situations, if you don't agree with me, you're a liar, scumbag, asshole, misogynist, homophobic, bigot, racist, or some other thing, okay? If you don't agree with me, you're a bad person, basically. So it's ad hominem, you're slandered. So you must agree with me or you're a bad person. And that's very often the way arguments are handled, because quite often the person who's trying to do something bad, they don't have any good reasons. So all they can do is insult you and say you're a bad person if you don't do this. Or there's going to be a punishment to you if you don't agree with me and go along with what I want. Okay? So this is what Walter Fisher emphasized. So he said, and lawyers know this perfectly well. If you study like what lawyers will say, they'll say the most important thing is just to get the jury to like your client. Even if your client's totally guilty, if the jury likes him, they might let him go, or something else might happen to make the case go easy for them. So a lot of times the truth and logic, unfortunately, don't matter that much. And like when I was a young guy, I would go to meetings, business meetings, job meetings, all these whatever negotiations, and I would listen to my father, and he would say, just tell the truth and provide your reasons. And I would lose because no one cared about the truth or reasons, okay? And my mom was much better to talk to. Once I started talking to my mother about these sorts of things, she'd say, oh no, that man, he just wants this. He's got the power. He's going to get it. Don't waste your time arguing. And she'd be right. Okay, so Fisher felt that Plato and Aristotle had overemphasized the rational world paradigm because they were used to situations where two aristocratic men of Athens were discussing a topic. But in the real world, the people come from quite often very different backgrounds and very, very different power perspectives. If you go to some business meeting, whoever's the CEO of the company, they've got the money and the power. Whatever they want is what's going to happen. If they genuinely want your opinion, you can provide it. If they genuinely want your opinion, they'll probably ask you in private. But in public, what they really want you to do most of the time is just force their way and pretend it's the noble thing. And you end up with what Thomas Carlyle had said. There's always a good reason that sounds nice, and that's what they say publicly. But behind the scenes, there's usually a real reason, which is not nice. They want money for themselves, power for themselves. They want to sleep with a woman or something like that. And that's why they're distorting it to get their way. And then they'll just say the other thing for whatever the purpose. People do that all the time. They seek a pretext that they can say publicly, but in reality, it's for their own money, power, financial gain, sexual gain, or something like that. So you got to look at what people do, and if you want to be able to handle situations intelligently, you need to be aware of all this stuff. Walter Fisher's paradigm narrative is very useful. It reminds me a little bit of Robert Pirsig, author of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, but he was a little more noble. He was talking about the concept of quality and arete and how we intrinsically recognize meritocracy in something good, and we like that and we honor that. But a lot of times somebody plays a game and distorts things, okay? And it's like I said, every guy's been through what I just described in a marriage. It's sort of like your sweet little fiance. Once she learns about divorce and how it comes to her favor, she ends up being your controller. For so many men, we like them more than they like us, which gives them another big advantage on us. Unfair. Let's see. In the narrative paradigm, the argument is won by reasons and emotions rather than logic. Yep. Let's see. And, Fisher's narrative paradigm, the by far less academic person can win a lot of arguments because they just have to stir up emotions on their own side. And unfortunately, it often plays into the hands of somebody who's dishonest and has bad motives. Now, I'm not saying the wife always does, but what I'm saying is this is used a lot of time for sophistry and to do bad things, is to just sort of drum up these emotional reasons and say, basically, if you don't agree with me, you're a bad person, or you're going to be punished in some way. So you're kind of forced to go along with it, even though it's completely untrue and wrong and bad. We all know what that's all about. And a lot of times the person pushing the bad narrative has some type of power over you. Maybe it's your boss. They control your salary. They control whether or not you have a job. So they just want you to acquiesce, to submit. Okay, so anyways, it's good to be aware of how a situation is being handled, because once you can recognize the nuance of it, you have a better chance to position yourself effectively.